Okay, I want to call our meeting to order. The hour is 7 PM. It's Tuesday, October 24. I want to welcome all of you in the room. We do have 3 or 4 more seats out front, those of you standing in the back if you're looking for them. And as we always do when we begin our select board meetings, I want to invite everyone to please rise and join us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, if you are new to these meetings, let me just offer just a couple of words of education. We have 4 items at the beginning of our agenda, one at 7, one at 7:10, one at 7:15, and one at 7:20. All of those are scheduled actions, so we need to stick with that schedule. If my intuition is correct, most of you in the room are probably here for the 7:20 item. So I'm going to ask that you bear with us while we work through 3 items ahead of that, and then we'll get to that discussion. And I need to ask for your cooperation in terms of quiet. If you want to talk to someone, I'd ask that you go out in the hallway because it echoes a lot in here. And we've learned the hard way that it's difficult for people in the audience to hear what we're saying, despite the microphones, if there's background noise. So there's a lot of people in here. We're very happy to have you anytime. I welcome you all back. We're here every 2 weeks. We might even be here on a Friday or a Saturday night at 7, but you're always welcome to join us. All right, our 7 o'clock item.
Chairman?
Yes, Mr. Mackey.
I thank you for that introduction on the 4 items we have tonight. In the interest of getting all of these fine residents who are here for that item, I would like to get the board's thought on taking item 4 out of order, I would then make a motion to remove Emerald Court from consideration, then table the item, and then go back to the order.
One of my colleagues have any opinion on that?
I think we can stay with the correct order.
Okay, let's move through. You're offering a motion, I assume. Is there a second to the motion? Okay, I don't hear a second, so the motion will fail. Let's move to the 7 o'clock item. That's Cracker Barrel Old Country Store. There's a change of manager application. Is there somebody here from Cracker Barrel? Welcome, gentlemen. If you can do us a favor and introduce yourselves for the record.
Sure. Attorney John Meridian, Democus Law Offices. With me is Charles Fitzmaurice with Cracker Barrel. Tonight we're here for a simple change of manager. Chris Pickett, the current manager of record, left the company, and Charles will be the new manager of record. He's tip certified, been working in the restaurant industry for numerous years. Has served as manager of record before at a prior restaurant, so he knows what he's doing. Staff is tip certified, and so that's the request.
All right. Has Mr. Pickert worked for Cracker Barrel for some time, or is he a new employee? I'm sorry, you're,
Morris.
yeah,
Charles Fitzmaurice, he's
Yeah.
been there since last December.
okay, great, all right. All right, any questions on the part of my colleagues?
I only have one, Mr. Chairman. It's,
Mr. Holland?
In your previous operations, you've never had any liquor violations?
No, sir.
All right, thank you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, anyone else?
Yep, real quick.
Ms. Wellman?
Thank you for being here tonight. In your previous employment with restaurants, all of those restaurants had liquor licenses, is that correct?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. I have no further questions. All of your paperwork is in order. We appreciate that work being done.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further questions, may I ask for a motion?
Mr. Chairman, motion to approve the change of manager for Cracker Barrel Old Country Store, Inc., DBA is Cracker Barrel.
Second.
Okay, and for our recording secretary's benefit, the motion's made by Mr. Mackey, seconded by Ms. Wellman. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye on that as well. That's a 5-0 vote in favor. Thank you. Good luck with your new role, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, where's Mr. Montori? All right, while we're waiting till 7:10, let me start with board reports. Mr. Holland, do you have any board reports this evening?
I have no board reports, but I do want to give a shout out to Mr. Hayes for running the event at the senior center last night for the new residents. He did an incredible job, and there was an incredible turnout.
Excellent.
That's all I have.
Thank you. Mr. Kratman, how about you?
Yeah, I had my LRTA board meeting is scheduled for this Thursday. We've had some preliminary meetings talking about some bus route changes that may affect Tewksbury, hopefully for the better, talking about bringing the bus to go the length of 38 and adding additional services through 133 and coming through. Tewksbury has always been on the second or third busiest routes through our community, and because of the growth in our residents in our community, they're talking about in new businesses, they're thinking about adding additional services as well. Much to the point of Mr. Holland, I want to also thank them for running that new residence. It was great to see. I think we had 158 families show up last night as residents. So that was nice to listen to their perspective of why they thought Tewksbury was a great place to move to. They all seem to be coming from other parts of the Commonwealth. There was some from out of state, but the majority of them seem to be from the Medford, Somerville, Everett, that area, moved up north to get the country feeling, and they were all happy to be here. I also want to give a shout out to the Friends of the Elderly. They ran a very successful breakfast for the seniors this Sunday. We had a large, probably about 100 people that came down, took advantage of it, and all the funds raised go to fund their Christmas party. So that was very successful, and I want to thank, everybody that helped out on that as well. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thank you, sir. Ms. Wellman?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A few things. The NIMCOG met a couple weeks ago for our annual meeting. The strategic plan work is still ongoing. I've sent some surveys out to town staff and former select board members that sat on NIMCOG to get their feedback for that strategic plan. I'll be a panelist on a sustainability summit coming up November 4th in Lowell. That's exciting, and it's interesting to have multiple communities talking to each other about sustainability. The DEI committee will be meeting next week. We have a bunch of new members, so it'll be good to get together and get our work going. To that end, a grant that we got with Leahy Health that is being administered through the police department sponsored a talk last week with the library on LGBTQ history. It was funded by that grant, and I wanted to thank Rep. Vanna Howard for attending that evening. Thank you.
Okay. Mr. Mackey, how about you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First, I want to open, there's the Veterans Breakfast on November 8th at the Senior Center. Additionally, I will be up at the State House on Friday for a panel on municipal cybersecurity, hopefully finding more interesting ways we can get resources for the town. And lastly, we are getting ready to close on about $150,000 grant for cybersecurity from Dragos. That's been in the pipe for about 2 years now. So that will be hopefully coming to or being actioned in the next 2 weeks.
Very good.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, I'm just going to add one item, and then we'll move to our 7:10 agenda item. I was asked to make it known that on this Friday, the 27th, Tewksbury will be hosting Fall Fun Day here outside the building on the town common from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m. And there are a lot of activities planned. If you want information about that specific event, you can get that on the town's website. So hopefully folks will make themselves available and attend that community event. All right, by the clock in the back of the room, it's now 7:10 p.m. So I'm going to call the hearing to order for our 7:10 agenda item. Bear with me while I read the hearing notice, and I'll ask if there are representatives here from TAC Auto Group to come forward and sit at this table while I read the notice. Notice is hereby given that the Select Board will conduct a public hearing in accordance with Mass General Law, Chapter 138, on Tuesday, October 24, 2023, at 7:10 PM on the application of Hatham Tac Tac on behalf of Tac Tac Auto Group, Inc., doing business as Tewksbury Auto Services, for the transfer of the Class 2 license from Tewksbury Auto Service, doing business as Barga Motors, located at 1258 Main Street, Tewksbury, Massachusetts, 01876. The hearing will be held in the Select Board's meeting room, the main hall at 1009 Main Street in Tewksbury. We welcome input from the public. The Select Board recommends that comments be submitted in writing in advance or before noontime Thursday, October 19, 2023. My colleagues also have a copy of the legal tombstone notice that was published, as well as a list of the abutters that were notified of this particular hearing, and the receipts for the certified mail that was associated with it. So at this point, let me ask, gentlemen, if you could speak into the microphone and identify yourselves for the record.
Good evening. My name is Haitham Tac Tac. I'm the president of Tac Tac Auto Group, Inc.
Okay.
And I just bought Tewksbury Auto Service. We are gonna do used car sales and some repairs and inspection, all that.
Okay. Who's with you, sir, if you don't mind?
I'm the owner of the property,
The current owner?
Yes.
Or the property owner?
the property.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
If you don't mind, just for the record, can we have your name?
My name is Masood Bousir.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so Mr. Tac Tac, have you been in the auto sales business before or for a while?
Yes, for since December 2012, so a little over 11 years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I worked in Wayland, Natick, Cambridge, last was Abington, and now here, Tewksbury.
Do you have any current facilities, or is this the only facility?
This is the only one. I was a partner in other facilities, but I sold them all, so this is the only one I have now.
Okay, and do you plan to be on site here in Tewksbury
Oh,
daily?
yeah, every day, 7:30, 5:30 at least, if not more.
Okay,
Yeah.
very good. All right, let me ask if my colleagues have any questions. Anyone?
I'm good.
This is, we have an extensive application, and it
Ask the
appears everything is in order. All right, let me ask if there's anyone in the audience that is here to speak on this particular item. You're a lucky man tonight. You could be here for a while. All right, I'm going to ask if there's a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Motion was offered by Mr. Kratman, seconded by Mr. Holland. All those in favor of closing the public hearing, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye as well. That's 5-0. And I will now ask if there's a motion on the transfer of the Class 2 auto license itself.
Mr. Chairman, I'll make a motion to approve the transfer of Class 2 auto license from, to Tac Tac Auto Group Incorporated, DBA Tewksbury Auto Sales.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Kratman, for the motion, and Mr. Holland for the second. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I vote in the affirmative as well. That's a 5-0 vote. So welcome to Tewksbury and best of luck in your
Thank
new
you so much.
endeavor. All right?
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we have a couple of minutes, another minute or so. Mr. Montori, you have town council invoice to present?
I do. Mr. Chairman, I would recommend payment of town council's invoice from September 1 through September 15th in the amount of $2,295.
Are there any questions on the invoice? If not, may I have a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, a motion's offered by Ms. Wellman, seconded by Mr. Mackey, to approve town council invoice September 1 through September 15, the amount of $2,295. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye as well. That is affirmative with a 5-0 vote.
The second invoice from September 16th through September 30th in the amount of $3,527.50, and I would recommend approval.
Any questions on that invoice?
I have none.
If not, may I ask for a motion?
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
All right, the motion's offered by Mr. Kratman, seconded by Ms. Wellman. All those in favor of the proposed motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The chair votes aye as well. That's a 5-0 vote for the record.
7:15.
All right, it's now 7:16. So we will ask if there's anyone here from MHF Tewksbury Operating Tenant 7 LLC. Welcome. As we have in the prior hearings, if you both wouldn't mind just introducing yourselves for the record.
Sure. My name is Elizabeth Pisano from Upton, Connell, and Devlin on behalf of the applicant.
Jim Tortolot, the hotel manager at the new Hilton Garden Inn Tewksbury.
And we met not too long ago,
We
right?
most certainly did. We've done a lot of renovations since
Is that
then,
right?
so yeah, getting
Okay.
ready to open.
What's your projected opening date?
Well, so we're selling hotel rooms now, so we got the Hilton Garden Inn franchise. We're working on getting our common vic license and finishing up the kitchen and swimming pool, and then we'll be fully open. So about 3 more weeks.
Very good. That's
Yeah.
exciting news.
We're very
Okay.
excited.
All right. So Counselor, we're just here on the common victual license, is that right?
Yes. Yep.
All the other items that are necessary, I think we've tended to already, is that correct?
Yes, we've been through the liquor license transfer. We're in the process of all the permits with the Board of Health. But the entertainment is scheduled in a couple of weeks. I'll be back on the 14th, November 14th for the entertainment.
All right.
But tonight is just for the common victular.
Okay. Okay. And you've given us a floor plan, and that's the first floor where there'll be storage and service, I take it?
Correct.
Okay. All right. All right. We've talked to this applicant a few times. Do my colleagues have any questions?
I have a couple.
Ms. Wellman?
Thank you very much. Nice to see you again.
Pleasure to be here.
I'm looking forward to the hotel opening and coming and checking it out, so it's really exciting. It's going to be an important part of our community because you have function space, and that's something that we need more of in this town, so we're a very
Yes.
active community. On your application, there is no number of seats and no number of employees, so can you give us a sense of how many seats you will have in your
have that.
restaurant?
Yeah, I have, the total number of seats is 742. That's what we have
Okay.
on our liquor license. It's what the occupancy is.
Okay.
Obviously, there are different rooms that hold different amount of people, but the total is 742.
That's a good amount. And then how many employees do you have?
So right now, we have about 35. We anticipate hiring another probably 20 to 25, so we'll finish somewhere between the 50 to 60 range,
That's great, okay.
maybe a smidgen higher. My math was off there, sorry about that.
We'll take more hires locally, we're fine with that. That sounds great.
We're looking if anybody's interested, so.
Very good. All right, that's great.
To know, you heard it here first.
Right. I noted the health department said you'll be doing a prepackaged breakfast only until the kitchen opens.
That's correct.
Is that the plan? And when will the kitchen open?
So it's still to be determined. We're finishing up renovations there. We had a pretty extensive renovation after working with the Board of Health.
Yeah.
So we're going through that now. We finished up, I think we got a plumbing inspection today that went well. So 2.5 weeks, I think, then we ought to pass our Board of Health inspection, and then we'll take about a week to prep the menu and get the kitchen properly set up. So I'm going to say third week in November, hopefully.
Will it be a restaurant that's open to the public, or is it meal service predominantly for guests, like breakfast only?
Oh, no, very much open to the public. So we'll have a full hot breakfast available as well as a buffet breakfast. Lunchtime, we generally won't be open, but we will have pre-made sandwiches and such. Dinner, we'll have a full dinner menu available and bar available as well.
All right,
Terrific.
thank
So,
you.
yeah, anyone's welcome to come and join us. And when you get to see the hotel, the lobby has been completely redone. It's bright, it's very professional. And again, it's got the Hilton standards behind it. So it's a great product.
Okay,
Terrific.
great. Thank you very much.
Our pleasure.
That's all, Mr. Chairman.
All right, Ms. Wellman, anyone else? No? Okay, can I ask for a motion on the common victual license approval itself?
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion to approve the common victular license for MHF Tewksbury Operating Tenant 7 LLC, doing business as Hilton Garden Inn.
Second.
Okay, for our recording secretary's benefit, the motion to approve was offered by Ms. Wellman, seconded by Mr. Mackey. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes in the affirmative as well, so that will be a 5-0 vote as well. All right, continued good luck and good
Thank you.
wishes to you.
Thanks. We'll see
Thank
you in a few
both.
weeks.
All right.
Thank you very
sounds
much.
good. Okay. Guess what, folks? We're at 7:20. All right, so we're going to invite the director of our Community Development Department. I think many of you may know her already, but Alexandra Lauder, to come forward. She's going to offer the board here a presentation. I think it may be similar, if not identical, to what some of you in the room have already seen or witnessed at the most recent community meetings on this topic. And I know the town manager will likely have some comments, but I want to also start off just by indicating that we will get to Emerald Court and the zone shortly, but what's important to understand is that this is a state mandate. It's not something that we made up here at this table. I've been here in this room for many years. When I first started, the hall was filled like it is this evening, so I want to say genuinely, we appreciate your being here. It's good to have a lot of folks from Tewksbury in the room to pay attention and follow what's taking place at the local level. After all, we are you and you are we, right? We live here just like you do. Every decision we make affects us as it does you. So this is a state law that's new, it's required. And all the time I've been here, my prior colleagues as well as my current colleagues, we've never taken the position that we can't follow the law. Our job is to do just that. So our job is to determine what is best for Tewksbury and how to stay in compliance with the state law. Doesn't mean that we like it, doesn't mean that we can't challenge our state delegation to change things, to advocate for us on Beacon Hill, to make things a little different as it relates to statutes such as this. And believe me that we're not bashful about that. So we will continue to do that. Doesn't mean that we can't write to our governor or our state agency secretariats and advocate for change. And believe me, we do that as well. And we are blessed and fortunate to have a highly skilled professional manager here in Tewksbury, the town manager, Mr. Montori, to my far left, who does a terrific job for all of us every day of the week. And I mean that literally every day of the week. There really are no weekends in this particular profession. So his guidance and his team, the assistant town manager, the community development director in front of you, they all have done an outstanding job of preparing for this particular eventuality and putting the materials together and educating, hopefully, the broader community, but also this board. This is the first time that this board is going to discuss this topic. And then there'll be a presentation, to my knowledge, in the next week or two with the planning board. And we will take some action, presumably at some point down the road. So I just want to offer those comments to give everyone an even foundation to stand on. And I'm going to open the floor to Ms. Lauder to give us the education that we need at this point. Okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, for the record, Alexandra Lauder, Community and Economic Development Planner. Thank you, members of the board. So this evening, we'll be discussing the MBTA community zoning and how it applies to Tewksbury. And forgive me if you've all sat through these particular slides in different combinations multiple times. So just a refresher. What is an MBTA community? and the name can be a little bit of a misnomer. An MBTA community is a city or town in Massachusetts which has MBTA services, either rail or bus, or abuts another community with these services, making it an MBTA adjacent community. Any MBTA community, adjacent or otherwise, is required to have at least one zoning district of reasonable size, and we'll get into what that means later, in which multifamily housing is permitted as of right without the need for discretionary approval. And just to back up for a little bit here, to address some planning jargon, by right means that no additional special permits are required for the use. However, tools like site plan review would be used to examine and mitigate a project's impact to the community, similar to how the town has handled retail marijuana facilities, where the use is by right, so they don't require a special permit, but they go for site plan review before any further approvals. And, of note, Tewksbury is considered an adjacent community, with Billerica, Wilmington, Andover, and Lowell all having rail services. And the requirements for all adjacent communities: minimum gross density of 15 units per acre, and to achieve the minimum enabled unit production. This is a bit higher in some of the proposed districts, and again, we'll get to that a little bit later. No age restrictions. It does not affect existing developments. Suitable for families with children, and districts must comprise of at least 50 total acres of land, with 25 acres of that contiguous, and no portion shall be less than 5 acres. And just to note that these parameters helped with site selection, because we couldn't cobble together a bunch of small lots. We had to have that 25-acre anchor to root the district somewhere. And as has been discussed, these new requirements are not a mandate to build. This zoning would be in place for potential future development for vacant lots or redevelopment of existing lots. That does not mean that any existing property is eligible for taking by eminent domain or any other public taking. The intention is to enable private development, so it is up to private property owners to exercise this zoning if they so wish.
So let me just ask a question here,
Please.
just so we can be clear. This is a long-term vision, correct? It's not something that is going to happen immediately, right?
Correct.
Over time.
Right. There's no time limit or time requirement to have the building occur. It is simply to put the zoning in place should somebody want to utilize it.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And moving on, so what is required for Tewksbury as an adjacent community, and for Tewksbury specifically? So not only do we have to adopt the multifamily zoning by right, but we have to adopt zoning to allow for the production of at least 1,214 multifamily units. Each city and town that is an MBTA adjacent community is assigned a certain number of units to guide their minimum production. That number was set by the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. I don't know how they came up with that, but each community has its own unique target number. Town meeting must adopt compliant zoning before December 2024. So December 31st, 2024 is the date by which MBTA adjacent communities must have the zoning adopted. And the proposed zoning district acreage cannot include wetlands, environmentally sensitive resource areas, or publicly owned land. Now, no publicly owned parcels have been included in any of the districts, but understandably and obviously, a lot of the districts, I think all of the districts, include wetlands or environmentally sensitive areas. So I'll get into this a little bit more in a few moments, but the GIS data, the map data, is input into a compliance model that the state issued to everybody to use, and that model automatically deducts acreage that is wetlands or other environmentally sensitive areas. So when you plug in the whole district, it pulls out those pieces. So when we start looking at the individual districts, you'll see a discrepancy between total district acreage and total eligible acreage. And just another note, as Mr. Johnson noted at the outset, the Attorney General did issue an advisory stating that noncompliance will be considered a discriminatory action under state and federal fair housing laws. So, initially it had been purported that communities would simply be risking certain funding avenues, but it is very clear, and the Attorney General made it so, that legal action is at stake. All right, so if you'll indulge me for a moment, we're going to look at a timeline of actions to date. This all started way back in January of 2021, if anyone can believe it, when Charlie Baker signed Mass General Law, Chapter 40A, Section 3A, popularly known as MBTA Communities, into law. And we didn't really hear a lot about it for a little bit. So in January of '22, myself and the assistant town manager made a presentation to this board just to introduce the topic as we were waiting to hear more from the state. And you'll see just the next item there that DHCD, the Department of Housing and Community Development, now known as the Office of Housing and Livable Communities, issued compliance guidelines. And they're called guidelines, but they are absolutely prescriptive. And they have been revised twice since then, on October 21 of '22 and as recently as August 17th of 2023. In January of '23, the town submitted an action plan for MBTA communities outlining how we plan to meet compliance. So going through the steps that I'm about to go through here and future actions to reach a compliant district. The town received in March of '23 a determination of interim compliance from DHCD. They took our interim action plan, looked at it and said, okay, this looks like a good roadmap, proceed. And then in June of '23, we launched a survey to solicit resident feedback for district siting. This was not meant to be the end-all be-all, but simply to start the conversation. We received about 333 responses, which takes me to my next point. On August 15th, 2023, we held a virtual information session to discuss the findings of the survey and to discuss next steps. Following that, we had an in-person workshop on September 13th, wherein residents participated in talking about the site-specific advantages and disadvantages for each of the sites. So traffic's going to be a problem everywhere. What about these specific sites do you think makes one better or worse than another? And we had about 40 participants in that, and that was held at the library. And then just 2 weeks ago, on October 12th, we had an in-person feedback session at the senior center where we discussed the feedback from our public safety departments and public works to kind of talk about the feasibility of what some of these sites would look at. We also looked at existing multifamily developments in town, because when you start talking about multifamily developments and this density and that density, and it's really hard to visualize. So I had pulled 4 different sites across town just to kind of talk about what different parking minimums looked like, what different densities looked like, and what different building heights looked like, just to really, give it a little bit more context. And then that brings us to this evening, October 24th, 2023, where I am presenting some of the findings to you folks. And
Excuse me, Mr.
Please.
Chairman. I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Hall?
Alex. Before we get into the districts, I'd like to make a motion to remove the town center district from consideration permanently.
What was that? We didn't hear the question.
Okay, so let me try to explain this process. We have microphones in here. This is a televised meeting, so only one person can speak. And I'm going to ask Mr. Holland to repeat what he said, so those of you who asked that can hear. But we can't run this room by 50 voices, all right? So anyone who has a comment, right now, the only people will be those at this table and Ms. Lauder. It's not a public hearing, and I want to be clear about that. There's an opportunity for residents to offer us input shortly. But at this point in time, this isn't an open forum. So I invite you to listen carefully. We're going to do our best to be as clear as possible, and I will try my best to explain what's taking place so that you are aware, okay? So bear with us, because there's a lot of people in here, and it can get unruly quickly, right? So Mr. Holland, can you do me a favor and repeat your comment and your motion if you offered one?
Number one, I want to apologize for interrupting you. I want to make a motion to remove the town center district from consideration permanently from this MBTA community.
Okay.
Second.
All right. And would you do us a favor? The town center district, can you state it in layman's terms so everyone in the room understands the
That would
geography
be
of it?
the Bayberry Emerald Court.
Okay. All right. Okay. So the motion is offered by Mr. Holland to remove that district from the discussion as we move forward this evening.
Permanently.
Correct? Permanently. And the second was offered by Mr. Mackey. All right. So normally, we'd wait for the presentation to be complete, and we would then take up any actions. But in light of the interest level that's in the room, certainly, I appreciate that. We have a motion and a second that's been offered. So let me ask if there's any comments at this board level around the motion, and I'll give my colleagues an opportunity. If not, I'm going to call for a vote.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to just discuss it a little bit. I couldn't agree with my colleague. I think this area was not suited for an MBTA communities. It's already developed. We already have housing down there for our residents, and there's not a lot of land down there to continue to develop. So I think this is a poorly thought-out location. I know we have to come up with zoning and try to find locations, but this is not a location. I'm reading through the acts and seeing all the different stipulations that you need to have on this. I don't like any of the zones, actually, but this one particularly, I don't like this one immensely, and I agree with my colleague. So I'll wait for the vote, but you think you know where I'm leading.
All right. Any other comments? Mr. Mackey, you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, Mr. Holland, I agree. You got the second on it. This was actually the exact intent of chain of action I tried to take earlier, so your timing is far superior to my own.
Okay. All right. If there's no other commentary, I will now ask for action on the motion that was seconded. And just for our recording secretary's benefit, if I didn't say so already, the motion was offered by Mr. Holland, seconded by Mr. Mackey. All those in favor of the motion to remove the town center district permanently from consideration on this action, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm voting in the affirmative as well, so that will be recorded as a 5-0. So now that you're all here, I'm going to invite you to continue to remain here so that we can collectively learn some more about this process. Because while this board is taking a position that that district should not be considered, there are other elements potentially in our community that still affect everyone in this room. So there's no harm in being educated a little bit. You're obviously welcome to leave at any time. I just ask if you would to try to do it quietly. And if you're all going to leave to go home, then I'm going to call a recess. So just show me a sign of hands. If anybody intends to leave, please do me a favor and just raise your hand, okay? Otherwise, we're going to plow forward. Okay. Back to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So before I get into the districts, I want to mention, previously I had said that these districts were plugged into a compliance model issued by the state, the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities. I like to call them the ARTIS, formerly known as DHCD. And it's an Excel format. It is a locked formula. We cannot do anything to it. So all we were charged with doing was having NIMCOG assist us in inputting the GIS data in there to remove those aforementioned environmentally sensitive areas, wetlands, and things like that. And to generate the minimum density figures for each of the districts, we input the following criteria, and these are just minimum criteria that we had to put in order to have some semblance of what the district would look like. And those are: 1, minimum lot size of 10,000 square feet; 2, the maximum height of 4 stories; 3, minimum open space of 20%; and 4, a parking minimum of 1, I guess maximum as well, just 1.5 parking spaces per dwelling unit for a development. And of note, these minimums and maximums already exist in our zoning bylaw as adopted in May of '22 across our Main Street districts. And some of these were also in place in our previous overlay districts as a part of earlier iterations of the zoning bylaw. So these are not new items. They were just ones that we thought fit appropriately into the model. And at risk of everyone behind me booing, I'm going to go through the feedback from all of the districts, including the town center, understanding that it is not up for discussion anymore, so please hold your applause or boos until the end. Thank you. So starting with the South District, this has an underlying zoning district of R40, which is residential 40 or single-family homes on 1 acre zoning. The total district acreage here is 131.3, and as I mentioned, once you plug it into that compliance model, a lot of that gets knocked out, and that makes the eligible acreage of 105.8 acres. And to achieve that minimum 1,214 units, the density for this district would have to be 18.6 units per acre. And the resident feedback that you see there below is what was collected during that September 13th feedback session. Of note, for the colorblind in the room, I apologize. I should know my husband's colorblind, but the green are the positives for the districts that people noted. So for this one, the parcels are entirely undeveloped. However, some disadvantages that people had cited were too close to the former Superfund site, wetland impacts in areas prone to flooding, no existing infrastructure, narrow roadways, and that it is isolated from other areas of town. And of note again, that R40 district means that the 2 residential uses allowed there would be single-family homes or an open space residential development, which is when you can get a special permit to do the number of units as many as there are acres. So for that parcel, it's about 80 acres. You could get 80 single-family homes, but to account for wetlands, you would designate a certain portion to be open space, permanently protected, generally not buildable. So those are the 2 avenues for residential development in that district. Next is North A. So South District, apologies. This is the area you can see on the map there behind Jenny's Way, and it directly abuts Route 93. And again, the Superfund site is to the south. Next is the North A District. This is almost the entirety of the Office Research District. In this area, the only allowed residential uses are congregate living and assisted living, memory care facilities, things like that. There's no multifamily or single-family home zoning or anything like that allowed. Here, the total district acreage is 502.5 acres. Because of a significant wetland presence, we are knocked down to 371.1. And the minimum units per acre to achieve that 1,214 target is 17.1 units per acre. And for the resident feedback here, folks noted easy access to the highway, large amounts of eligible acreage, and already has some density existing up there. Notable disadvantages were, again, wetland impacts, which is unfortunately not going to be unique to this or any other district, too far from transit and other amenities, and the following was written down verbatim. I have not evaluated this: poor air quality near highways. And of note for this one, when solicited for feedback from our public safety and public works departments, noting that there are some challenges with being that far to the north, and we know, unfortunately, intimately, that there have been issues with some water infrastructure going towards the north. Now, admittedly, that's on private property, but still, it's still at the forefront of everybody's mind. North B, this is another one that is zoned R40. So again, single-family homes or that open space residential design, which allows for single-family homes on less than 1 acre, provided that open space is provided. And total district acreage here is 128. Total eligible acreage is 109.4. This is the Trull Brook Golf Course in its entirety. And the minimum units per acre to achieve that target amount is 17.6. The resident feedback, again, solicited on September 13th. Large amount of eligible acreage. So the ratio of what gets knocked out due to wetland presence is probably the least of all the districts. However, it is, again, isolated, not near transit and amenities, and there would be the loss of open space. And again, in speaking with our public works and public safety departments, public safety in particular noted that because of the far end of town, they already have a longer response time for that area, and just making sure that that was known during the process. The Town Center District, which encompasses Emerald Court and Archstone. This is zoned both mixed-use business on the Archstone side and multifamily on the Emerald Court side. Total district acreage here is 109.1. Eligible acreage is only 63.4, again, due to the large wetland presence, and the minimum units per acre to achieve that target amount of 1,214 would have been 25.8, notice past tense. Resident feedback here was that it is close to transit and amenities, and there is already dense housing. However, notable disadvantages being wetland impacts, no unbuilt eligible acreage, and multiple private property owners, leading to a less likelihood of redevelopment. Heading to Main Street B, I don't know how well you can see that map there, but we're looking in the area from Stoneberry Way all the way to Orchard Street. So that encompasses the old Preferred Distributor site, 1325 Main Street. It encompasses Soldier On, 1660, and catches a couple of other multifamily developments along the way. The total district acreage here is 180.6, with the eligible acreage being approximately 152. And the minimum units per acre to achieve that 1,214 is 17.2. This is entirely in the mixed-use business district, which allows multifamily currently by special permit only. And resident feedback for this area, there's already some density. It is near transit and amenities, amenities like some restaurants. You also have the Circle Health building there, new sidewalks. Some of the disadvantages are little unbuilt eligible acreage, and it's not near the highway. However, unbuilt acreage isn't the end-all be-all of this, because the intent is to put the zoning in place should redevelopment be possible, or one of the reasons. And last but not least, Main Street A. This is entirely encompassed in our South Village Business District, which allows multifamily and congregate facilities by special permit. This encompasses the area around Al Fresca on both sides of the street, all the way to the Oakdale Plaza where Market Basket is on Shawsheen, again, both sides of the street, and it's all the properties that directly abut Main Street. And the total district acreage here is 84.3, with the eligible acreage being 63.5. The minimum units per acre to achieve that target amount is going to be 19.7. And, folks who can see here that this received more positive feedback than others, noting that it is centrally located, walkable, and it has newer sidewalks. Of note, Al Fresca just put their new sidewalks in front of their property, and they look great. Near transit and amenities, so you're walking distance to a gym, grocery store, Starbucks, which is very important to some people. And there is redevelopment potential, noting that we have a couple of really large parcels in Heathbrook Plaza, Oakdale Plaza, and a couple of others that could be utilized under the zoning. And for a disadvantage, has the least amount of unbuilt acreage. Again, that's not a deal breaker for any of these, because things can be rebuilt. So the previous timeline that I had shown you folks was what we've done to date, and this is what we have still left to do. So following this presentation, should we be moving forward with action, this almost identical presentation would be made to the planning board on Monday, the 30th, which is next Monday, incorporating feedback from this board. The target then is to submit 2 districts to the Executive Office of Housing and Livable Communities, because they are doing preliminary pre-town meeting vote compliance reviews to ensure that what communities bring to town meeting are viable, so that you don't do this whole thing for no reason. And then following that, we would submit a district, provided that one or both of the districts that are submitted to the state are compliant, taking one of those and submitting it to town meeting for the warrant to close in February of '24. The planning board would obviously hold a public hearing on it as a zoning change on or around April 24, and it would conclude with annual town meeting vote on May 8th. And that is all I have.
Alex, just one question. You referenced the potential to submit 2 districts to EOHLC.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a recommended or mandated course, or just a strategic thing here locally?
It's more of a strategic move, just to make sure that we're not putting all of our eggs in one basket. Because they require approximately 90 days to do the preliminary review. It's not like if we submit one in November, they kick it back to us a couple of weeks later and say, this one doesn't quite make the mark, try again. We won't have the time to try again. So in order to make sure that we have something prepared for a May town meeting before the warrant closes, the intention is just to kind of give ourselves a little bit of wiggle room.
Yeah, okay, and often we're kind of handcuffed as a community and certainly as a board with the town, the form of government that we have in terms of the timeline is very long. So in order to meet a December of 2024 deadline, we have to take action at a town meeting, which presumably would be May of next year. So what I'd like to ask you, and if not, Mr. Montori, is just to detail a little bit more so we're all educated around not just the high-level deadlines, but the specific deadlines. For example, the town meeting warrant typically closes in mid-February, right? So we know sitting here, we'd have to have a decision at least by then at the outside. But if we also need to have the so-called EOHLC, I'm going to learn to memorize that. If their input is critical before we go to town meeting and draft a warrant, then I assume there's runway room that we need to determine that. And I'm interested in educating this board about its obligations as it relates to that timeline. So
Sure.
can you offer comments on Mr.
Absolutely.
Montori?
So just as you said, to back out from the May 8th town meeting date, we know we have to, the warrant really drives all of this, right? So if we're looking at this year's warrant closing date, I believe was on or around February 17th. So want to have that backed out approximately 90 days, puts us around mid-November. I have November 3rd here just to be a little more conservative because the EOHLC has also made it clear that they are going to be prioritizing the rapid transit communities. So rapid transit meaning, Brookline, Alston, those communities, they have to have the zoning in place by the end of this year. So while they're encouraging all of us to send MBTA adjacent and otherwise communities to send it in as soon as possible, they've made it clear that they're going to be prioritizing those communities first to make sure that they review all of them. So I think it's probably safer to say that we're probably not going to get any feedback at least before January. And at that point, again, it would probably be too late. So having something to submit to the state in November, I think, is going to be really crucial to making sure that we have something that is viable for May town meeting.
Right.
The actual text is not terribly involved. We have existing overlay districts. At the previous feedback session on October 12th, I had put in some draft bylaw language that really just mirrors what our interstate overlay district looked like. So saying what the scope is, the authority, what the specific dimensional parameters would be for that district. So like I mentioned, right now, we have plugged in 10,000 square feet minimum lot area, 4-story building height maximum, 1.5 parking spaces, and 20% open space. That's something we can shift in either direction, understanding that the consequence could be for higher density. So those are the finer details we'll have to work out, but the districts also work with those inputs. So that's something that can certainly work as a model. And just getting back to your original question, I apologize for drifting a bit, but in order for May to be feasible and for all of this to work, we need something to go to the state for a preliminary review. And the preliminary review isn't required, but in office hour sessions with the EOHLC staff, they have made it highly recommended. And I tend to agree. Even before we started doing those office hours, as soon as I found out that they do preliminary review, I'm like, well, why wouldn't you? Because going through the effort of doing all of this, bringing all these people here, talking to you folks, and then not being able to get to the finish line because there was something that could have been caught earlier, I think would be rather unfortunate.
And there's only so much bandwidth with respect to town meeting, so.
Yeah.
Mr. Montori, do you want to add any comments to those?
No, I mean, Alex touched upon all the points. Our biggest issue is being ready for town meeting. Hopefully, the state acts quicker than the 90 days they're allocated. But, the warrant does close in February. We need, there's public hearings for the planning board, there's printing on the warrant, mailing of the warrant. So it's a rush, even with February being a deadline. So if the board could, take up this issue and make a decision, meeting Alex's deadline, maybe slipping, a little bit later, but not too much later. That'd be helpful. We're prepared to make a recommendation. I'm prepared to make a recommendation on what district should go forward, but, a lot of time and effort's gone into this.
Doesn't include the town center, right?
It does not. It does not.
Okay. All right, so, well, you just opened the door, so let me ask if you and your team do have a recommendation that you want us to
So-
consider.
Absolutely. So, again, this has been something we've been working on since last December. And Alex and Steve Sadler have done a terrific job since then, taking the time to review where to locate the districts, working with, on outreach, going to meetings, having working workshops, listening sessions, keeping the Board of Selectmen updated, keeping the planning board updated. And they came up with the districts as Alex presented tonight. From our discussions internally, it really was clear to us that Main Street A and Main Street B should be submitted to the Commonwealth for review and consideration. And then out of those two, if approved by the Commonwealth, we would bring one forward to town meeting. And that's what I would recommend the board consider, whether you decide tonight or a future meeting, but that's the recommendation that I would provide.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, and just for my colleagues' benefit, to remind you, we have meetings, excuse me, in November. The next meeting is the 14th. The 28th, I believe, is the second, and you're going to hear discussion as we progress through our evening tonight that we want to add a meeting on the 21st, and ideally that would be dedicated to the tax classification hearing. But if we needed to add one or two agenda items, we could. So we're looking at 14, 21, and 28 at this point in time. So the board certainly, as Mr. Montori indicated, could take action on this item tonight or could take it under advisement. And if we take the counsel of our staff and management, that ideally we want to have something to present to the Commonwealth to get their feedback before we're locked in to a path for town meeting. The month of November seems to be the target month. So I just want to outline that for your thought process. All right, Alex, do you have any other comments you want to offer us?
I do not.
Okay, so let me ask my colleagues if they have questions that they want to pose to Alex or the town manager. Mr. Mackey?
Thank you,
raised your
Mr.
hand
Chairman.
first.
Thank you. So through you to the town manager, Ms. Louder, I know this is kind of uncharted territory. As you said, there's been revisions on the guidance multiple times, but you said something that really piqued my interest. So what happens if we do submit two and they come back and they don't like either? Are we just then non-compliant? Or is there some sort of mechanism built in? Again, fully understand you might not have that answer, uncharted territory, but not sure if you heard something.
No, so we're not going to be considered out of compliance unless we miss that December 31, 2024 deadline. So if it comes to be that neither district that we have submitted is compliant and neither is viable for a May town meeting, we can certainly review and regroup and either make the corrections, assuming that EOHLC gives us specific and actionable feedback, and go to town meeting making those corrections, or have to go through the process again and possibly look at a later town meeting. Ultimately, it's preferable that we do May so that we have less of a time crunch towards the end of the year. Because then there's also the issue where we've also not seen our Attorney General approval letter for that zoning until January after October town meeting. And in fact, we didn't receive the final approval for May until, I think, the last week. So understanding that everybody's going to be submitting, everybody being all of the 175 MBTA communities and adjacent communities submitting at the same time, I can't imagine that that's going to be a super quick review process. So just to address your original question once more, I hope it's not the case because we're using their compliance model to generate these districts. But if it did happen, then we could either make actionable adjustments based on their feedback and proceed to town meeting anyway, or we'd have to look at another avenue.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Ms. Wellman?
Thank you. Thank you, Alex. Thank you for the work that you've done on this. I know it's been a lot of work. I'm familiar with the compliance model and the amount of detail and how meticulous it has to be as you go through that process. So I know you spent a lot of time in front of those screens, and I appreciate all the work that you've done and the presentations and community engagement that you have brought forward to the community over the duration of this project. It's substantial, and your work has been exceptional, and I thank you for it. And now I'll ask you some questions.
Please.
So can you, looking back through the districts, the South District, I thought that was zoned mostly agricultural.
No, so in the latest recodification of the zoning bylaw and the establishment of different underlying districts, that whole area is zoned R40.
Okay, so thank you for that. On the North districts, North A is the portion, thank you, that is around the highway. And I think that that access to the highway is critical, considering that Main Street A and Main Street B will have significant or potentially significant traffic impacts if we put all of this zoning in that area for future development. And Main Street is difficult. We've just done the Main Street pavement project, or the state has done that work, and it's great, but it's not going to get widened anytime soon. So the North District, I think, is interesting. I'm not really all that concerned that it's far from transit, because the LRTA in the future, if a development is there that is applicable, could adjust routes to accommodate that transit. So for me, and the fact that it has the largest amount of eligible acreage is important as well, because we know that we need to create housing. And that is the purpose of this legislation. We also maintain a fire station on North Street, and so our EMS does serve the north section of town because we have the train lines that are there. The town has made a commitment to always keep that station open, and I think that's an important aspect of any potential zoning, is that we are aware that our first responders can make it to these facilities. On Main Street B, I was curious why these open parcels that are undeveloped behind, there's Patrick Road, and then there's this yellow line that's the outside perimeter, why these parcels back here are not included in the district. And I know there's all the parts of the compliance model and so forth, but I was curious about
Yes.
that.
So I would have to look at the entire map to be able to answer that question adequately. I'm happy to do that if you'd like me to.
We can take that offline, sure, yeah. I would love to. I'd be curious about, because there's some, it looks like there could potentially be eligible unbuilt.
Yeah, I can't see quite on this zoom in what it backs up against, but I
Yeah,
expect that
there's
there
some
was a reason.
wetlands. Yeah, I don't know either, so I'm curious about it, because there's a school there, and there are some high-density, multifamily developments in this area, and there are some, services. Under Main Street A, I was curious why the post office wasn't included in this parcel, in this district.
Publicly owned.
There you go. That's why. Thank you. Publicly owned so far. My concerns, I like Main Street A. I live in that area. I live on Shawshene Street. I do like Main Street A as an option. It does have access to all kinds of services. It will potentially, just the size of the developments could create significant traffic impacts. I drive that area every day, like many people in this room and our community do, and it can be really challenging to get through Shawshene and Main Street, those intersections at rush hour, particularly in the evening and on weekends. So one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit, you touched on this in one of your previous presentations, I think at the Senior Center, I was at that presentation, and I've attended a number of your engagement opportunities. What kind of development are we looking at in terms of density? I think what folks tend to think about is a big multi-family, apartment building or condo that's similar to Ames Lodge. And we have talked about with NIMCOG and with CTI and other stakeholders, the missing middle of housing. Duplexes, triplexes, cottage courts, courtyard buildings, and townhouses and so forth. So what are you envisioning that might go into some of these places? I don't know if that's premature to the process, but I think it is helpful to kind of think of what would it look like, and at what point do we as a community insert that kind of vision either into the zoning, or where does that process come in? Because if we're saying we can get, 19 units per acre, what does that look like? And how do we understand that space as we, what does that look like in terms of, I have to get down to traffic impacts and studies, that's for down the road with planning, but how does that happen in this process? So your vision, and then how do we get to that part of the
Sure.
process?
So there's a couple of things at play here. So for the individual parcels that do have significant wetland presence or other resource areas, those areas are not allowed to be counted towards the density.
Right.
So, for example, I'm looking right at it, the Heathbrook Plaza parcel is approximately 30 acres. However, only, I think, 15 and change are eligible to be counted towards the density. We have a provision in our bylaw that we have to have at least 50% contiguous uplands, and only a certain amount of the wetland acreage can count towards the density. It's only 5%. So a 30-acre parcel is not going to be 30 acres at 19.7, it's going to be 15 at 19.7. So just wanted to make that clear that the eligible acreage accounts for that, but then on a parcel level, it's accounted for again. And as far as what these could look like, the sky's really the limit here. And putting in some of the parameters like building height, maximums, open space, minimums, it really would come down to working with a potential developer on what those could look like. There's also the possibility of implementing design guidelines, which is not necessarily in the zoning, but it is a document that the planning board, and in conjunction with other groups, could come up with to guide any potential design in this overlay district. Because as we mentioned, it's not like the district is going to be implemented in May, and then when Thursday, May 9th, someone's going to be knocking on the door of the project. The zoning will be there, but the planning won't have happened yet. So we would have, ultimately, ideally, we would be in a position to work with somebody who wants to make that development happen, utilizing this zoning and working with them on what the design could look like, or if there's no immediate interest, then developing those design guidelines. And that's something that we can work with NIMCOG on. We've also worked with other firms in the past. We have town center design guidelines that are actually quite old at this point, but they were used to really guide what the development could look like. We also do have some zoning bylaw specific provisions for town center development. Again, that's something we could tackle at a later date, or we can just have an independent design document.
So that's not something that we would necessarily insert into this zoning?
No.
And that is exempt, that's not allowed under the state law, is that correct?
Right, so we can't put a lot of restrictions on it. It would have to be a separate process if we were to develop specific design guidelines, making sure that we're not running afoul of the legislation.
Right, exactly. Part of what I envisioned for where Main Street A is for this district is moving it into, into the future, something like, sort of like a village center, South Village, and we've talked about this in the past, but having human scale design here with, street lights and, plazas, and it's very walkable, and now that the town has built sidewalks on Shawshene Street, there's just so much foot traffic in the area, and then being able to connect that to the section of Main Street that runs to South Street. And so I'm hopeful that as we go forward with these design, we keep a global, or certainly a neighborhood view, so that it's integrated and it's well done and it's thoughtful, and the community has an opportunity to feed back into that design plan. So that's why I brought it up, and I want to have that be part of the conversation going forward. You have,
Sorry, could I add one comment to that
Please.
before we move on? So I would encourage folks who are interested in what design guidelines could look like to look at section 6.4 of the zoning bylaw that has the town center
Yep.
specific design guidelines, and it includes things like open space areas, areas where there would be benches, seating,
exactly.
designed for communal gathering. So just some thoughts that folks could look at if that's what we want to move towards, but please.
Yeah, no, and I look forward to having those continued conversations, no matter what district goes forward before the town meeting for approval. Again, I thank you for your work and your responsiveness to the community, and you've done a great job. Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else at this table, Mr. Kratman?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much for putting this together. I understand that this is a state mandate. They filed legislation on this. But I want to be very clear on this. Has our delegation reached out to anybody in the town, in our community, or anybody, asking if our input on this, if this is something that we want prior to voting on it? So this is legislation that was filed without any input from our community. Residents didn't have input, our board didn't have input, and so something was filed legislation. I don't know if they voted for it, I don't know if they didn't vote for it, but I know they were welcome here to come tonight and speak on this matter, and I'd like to know their stance on this. I know they signed legislation, but this is bad legislation. I understand that we need more affordable housing, but we're a town of Tewksbury. Putting 18, 19 units per acre for 60 acres in our town, it's not what we want. People moved here to this community to have a small town feeling. This is not the city of Tewksbury. And just because our legislature filed a bill to say that we're mandated to do this, doesn't mean that we shouldn't be calling back up to our state house and saying, you know what, pick up that pen and pen and sign something else. I want to pass something around to the rest of the board. I spoke to Representative Lombardo. He filed House docket number 4465. And that's new legislation that he just filed. And part of it says if a community is over their 10%, then they're exempt from the MBTA communities. So they filed this, he just filed this legislation. And so any community that's over their 10% affordable housing on the 40B would be exempt from this. I would love for our delegation to sign on to this or file something else that doesn't turn our small little town into something that we don't want. This legislation takes in no consideration for what we've built over the last 5 or 10 years. We've had a lot of development in this town, and the residents have listened, and we've worked very hard. We just did a zoning rehab of what we want in our community. We worked years on it to find something that the residents could go to town meeting and discuss. Putting 18 or 19 units any place in this town, I understand they're saying we must, but my attitude is we must push back. This is not something that I think is good for our town. Somebody telling me I have to do it because a bunch of representatives without our input voted something in, I'd like to have a say at the table before I sign anything or send anything to town meeting. I know everyone seems to be in a rush because we have to get it on town meeting, but, you know, everyone showed up here because it's one of the areas you're talking about. We pick an area tonight, and then who's to say I don't have 200 people for the other area of town, or the other area of town? I was looking through some of this things that says that the zones must be at least half a mile from a bus or train. So has that changed? Because that's what it says inside the, on the thing.
That was in the original legislation, but for MBTA adjacent communities, that is no longer a requirement because a community like ours literally can't do it.
Okay, so when I'm on the website, it's not changed on the website if they filed something new?
That was in the updated guidelines,
Okay.
yeah.
So if they're able to update those, we should be able to, I mean, this is something that we can't handle the traffic we have right now. This is unfunded mandate. There's no transportation improvements put forward with this. This is something that's saying you have to do, and then you have to figure out how to deal with, was it 1,200 units of new housing? In 19 per acre? 63 acres with 19 on every single acre. And that's something that I'm supposed to say, well, I have to do it. I refuse to. I understand that they filed legislation, but it's, just because somebody files bad legislation doesn't mean we're going to say, throw our hands up and say, this is something we have to take. You know, we have our own representatives, we have our own senators, and I'd like to know what they're doing to stand up for us. And they should be coming forward and saying, this is not something that's good for our town. I don't think anybody in this town wants 19 units per acre anywhere near their home. So if you're in South Tewksbury, North Tewksbury, Main Street, anywhere through, it's a lot of housing, and we've already built, like all the housing we've built, like over the last couple of years, none of that has been taken into consideration. And so there may be other communities that are underdeveloped, but that certainly doesn't sound like Tewksbury. So I understand we have to come up with something, but like I said, just because somebody's saying it's a mandate and they're going to file suit against us, they're not giving us anything. They're not offering any transportation improvements. They're not offering any help for our, departments. If you hire that, we build in that many more people, our schools are going to grow. That means we're going to have to add more water and sewer. We're going to need more fire department, more services, everything that's going to go along with it. There's no funding coming along. We haven't got any major we've had our roads resurfaced, but nobody's done a major widening. Nobody's offered any kind of transportation improvements whatsoever to do. So if we were to put all these units down there, is the state going to come forward? Because there's too many cities and towns. They're not going to be able to do it for the 187 cities and towns. That means we're not going to get it. It's going to be up to the taxpayers of Tewksbury to find a way how to deal with this traffic. And it just doesn't sound like something that we should accept without at least putting up a battle. And I'm not willing to make a vote on it tonight. I'll make sure of that. But just to get to town meeting doesn't mean that we need to do it. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Anyone else?
I have.
Mr. Holland.
I tend to agree with Mr. Kratman on this issue. The state is not doing us any good. And I'm afraid that even he said you had the 1,214 units, and with the governor's new bond bill of $4 billion, also states they're going to use state land. What does Tewksbury have a lot of? State land. And my concern is how much of that is usable by the state if they decide to use that state land to build housing. And it's not directed to you, it's directed at everybody, And unfortunately, I can't support any of these until I have those answers. Because if we have to build 1,214 houses, state comes in and says, oh, well, we have a lot over here, we're going to put 2,000 more houses on, now we get 3,000 homes, and you divide it by 2, everybody has a half a kid, that's 1,500 kids. You're going to have to buy 3 new schools. It doesn't make sense. And I know I'm looking at you, but it's not you, But that's how I feel, Mr. Chairman. So I am not prepared to take any of these districts into consideration this evening.
Very good. All right. Anyone else? Okay. All right. Thank you for your comments, fellow board members. I appreciate that. So do you have any further last comments you want to offer us?
No.
Good luck. Mr. Montori, anything from you?
No, I just want to reiterate that from the administration standpoint, we have been moving forward since last year to put the town in the best position possible for compliance. We're not commenting on whether this is a good law or a bad law or anything. We are doing what we're supposed to do as the administration, which is to make sure the town is in the best position possible for compliance to a law. If the board chooses not to, that's obviously and no doubt up to the board, but I just want to make it known that, we're setting the town up for compliance.
Mr. Chairman, one last point. I want to make, Alex, you did a wonderful job. I don't think anybody in this audience, this is not something that's her idea. She's doing what we're asking her to do. She's doing her job. She's coming up with the best from a bad situation. So I think she's doing a fabulous job. I appreciate you putting this in front of us and doing the best of a bad situation. This is not something that the residents of Tewksbury really were looking for, but you did your best with what they mandated us that we must do. So I appreciate your hard work.
All right, I think it was mentioned earlier that we did attempt through the town manager to ask our delegation to join us this evening, and for whatever reasons, they were not available. What I'd like to do is ask my colleagues someone to offer a motion to authorize the chair, that being me, to email the delegation on behalf of the board, and more importantly, on behalf of the community, to ask them to come to meet with us, and not specifically necessarily to beat them up around MBTA, but to ask them to give us some guidance on the housing bond bill that Mr. Holland just referenced, because there is the potential that it collides with this obligation or potential obligation. And it's something that, from a stewardship perspective, this board needs to better understand so we can do the right thing for our community. And then, of course, there are questions about potential modifications to the MBTA legislation that might be something that we could seek out their assistance with. So I'd like to ask for that, and then I will endeavor to get communication out to them. I also want to balance with that the counsel that we've been provided, that we try to take action and make a decision on this topic in the month of November, so that we're not hamstringing ourselves and putting the town in jeopardy in any way. While I don't disagree with many of Mr. Kratman's comments, I take a conservative view. We don't live in a country where we can do whatever we want. We're a law-abiding country. And we need to follow what the statutes tell us to do. That doesn't mean, as I said in the beginning, that we just have to roll over and accept it. But in the meantime, we have to take the right steps to protect our community. So that means we can't ignore it while we argue about it. We still have to ensure that things get done appropriately. So I don't think any of us, judging by the conversation, are prepared nor want to take any action this evening. I'm guessing that. I'm going to ask if there's a motion on that in a few minutes. But as was pointed out, most people in the room tonight are here because of one district that was proposed. And quite frankly, as the media in Tewksbury publicizes this conversation, and our future agendas are put forward, there may be just as many people from another district or two that might want to be here in the future, and I encourage them to be here and be heard. But those are things that we need to offer that opportunity around. So let me go back to the first comment that I made regarding the delegation. And I don't have the authority to act for this board unless this board grants it to me. So that's why I'm proposing that action.
I'll make that motion, Mr. Chairman.
Second, vehemently.
Second for discussion.
Okay, so just for our recording secretary, Mr. Holland offered the motion, Mr. Mackey seconded, and before I call for a vote, Ms. Wellman has a comment.
Thank you. I think it's great that you are calling for this motion. I think it's important that this board acts with one voice. Whether we disagree here at this table, once a vote is taken, I think it's important for this board to act with one voice, whether that is to our community or to our delegation or to the governor or whoever we want to talk to. So I appreciate that. I think it's important that the board does do an invitation to our delegation with grace, and that we continue to try and have a professional relationship with the delegation. I've heard a lot of things that make me think that this board wants to have an adversarial relationship with our delegation, and I don't think that serves the public. I don't think it serves our residents. I don't think it serves our purposes. Whether we disagree or agree with our delegation, the MBTA Communities Act passed by both houses with 4 dissenting votes in both houses. It was 4. It's overwhelmingly approved across the state. So it's not our 4 members of the delegation who turned on the town, and I think we need to be very careful about how we approach this and the language that we use, because they are our partners, and they do return quite a bit of money back to this community, and they are working on our behalf. And I think that we should be cognizant of that as we go forward and work with them and not against them, and represent our residents when we speak with our delegation and with the governor and anybody else we need to. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
All right. Okay, so before me, I have a motion and a second, as previously stated. All those in favor of the motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. That's 5-0. So now I have some homework. Okay. All right. So I think it's pretty obvious, but just for the record, let me ask if there's a motion to table this discussion to a future agenda.
So moved.
Second.
The motion's offered by Ms. Wellman, seconded by Mr. Mackey. All those in favor of that motion, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye on that as well, so that's 5-0. So I want to thank my colleagues for their patience. I want to thank everyone in the room for their decorum and their patience. And we are going to close this subject out. I want to thank Ms. Lauder for her presentation and her repetitive efforts to educate our community. They are indeed, as Mr. Kratman said, much appreciated. We're going to move forward with the rest of our agenda. You're all welcome to continue to remain. It's 8:30. Otherwise, I'm going to take a brief recess for 5 minutes. All right, we're back. Okay, and now there's a little echo in the room. So, all right. The first thing I want to attend to is opportunity for residents. I probably should have done this before everyone left. Any residents with any commentary for us to speak on any topic of their choosing for a short period of time. I don't see anyone rising, so we'll move forward. Under new business, you have in your packets acceptance of 2 donations in memory of, to benefit the Tewksbury Senior Center. The first is a $50 donation from Jean Brown in memory of Marjorie Moulazon. And the second is a donation in the amount of $100. The donor is not identified, but it was for or in memory of Frogie Kerr. So I'd like to ask the board to vote to accept those 2 donations.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second.
Okay, the motion was offered by Ms. Wellman, seconded by Mr. Holland. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Chair votes aye. Is there anyone opposed? That would therefore be a unanimous vote. The next item we have is marijuana retailers host community agreement approvals. This board, as you know, or many are aware, took action a couple of months ago relative to the site locations or awarding of licenses to 2 proposers for retail marijuana facilities here in the town of Tewksbury. Tewksbury is authorized to grant up to 3, and the board opted to award just 2 for the time being. One pertains to an organization called Pure Tewksbury. The other pertains to an organization called Lazy River Products Tewksbury LLC. And during some executive session, contractual discussions took place with the town's administration. Language was reviewed and approved. This is a highly regulated area in the Commonwealth. The town manager and his staff, I believe, met with the 2 organizations and their council, along with town council on our side. And what we have before us this evening is the culmination of that effort in both instances. And I believe, and I'll secure confirmation from the town manager in a moment, but I believe the recommendation is that these 2 agreements are now in a position to be approved by the board and executed. Is that accurate?
That is correct, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. So we've all had an opportunity to review the contents in the past. We've contributed to the content from a recommendation standpoint, and those discussions took place. So if there are no further substantive discussions, I'll ask for a motion to approve the host agreement. Let me, for the record, take them both independently so that we capture the agreements independently of one another. So let me ask for a motion if someone is so inclined to approve the host community agreement between the town of Tewksbury and Pure Tewksbury, Inc.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, the motion's offered by Mr. Kratman, seconded by Mr. Holland. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed?
Abstain.
Chair votes aye on that, so that would be 4 votes in favor, and for the record, Mr. Mackey is abstaining from the vote. Then let me ask if there's a motion to approve the host community agreement as presented between the town of Tewksbury and Lazy River Products Tewksbury LLC.
So moved, Mr. Chairman.
Second for discussion.
Okay, all right, okay, so we have a motion offered by Mr. Kratman, seconded by Ms. Wellman. I always struggle with second for discussion,
I
because
know.
it's either a discussion or a second. So are you seconding the motion?
I just think it should be changed. The date should just be changed to reflect the current date.
Okay,
That's all.
All right, so you can ask,
Scrivener's change.
maybe the town manager can change the date of the agreement.
Because you said as presented.
Okay, thank you.
That's why.
Appreciate it. And you're going to stand on
is
your
a second.
second?
I sure
Thank
do.
you so much.
You're welcome.
Okay, so motion by Mr. Kratman, seconded by Ms. Wellman. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Abstain.
Chair votes aye. So again, Mr. Mackey, for the record, is abstaining. So that's 4 votes in favor, 1 abstention. All right, that brings us to a tree hearing objection. I see our Public Works Director, Mr. Hardeman, is present. You want to join us up front, sir? I don't have a public hearing notice on this, but we do have correspondence from Marquee Tree Service speaking to the trees in question. So maybe you could give just a brief overview of the issue at hand?
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Kevin Hardman, Public Works Director, and as well as Tree Warden. So we did post some trees for removal. We had a public hearing on October 19th at the DPW, and during the course of that hearing, there was an objection to removal of one of the trees, which is at 240, it's across from 240 Fisk Street. It's related to the sidewalk project we're doing out there. It's a 12-inch red maple that is adjacent to the sidewalk, and we feel it'd be best to remove that tree. It's not necessarily the healthiest tree. It has had some leaders removed, some trimming due to the power lines. It is in front of 12 Bridle Path, which is Mike and Michelle Barrow, who are present here today. I want to thank them for sticking around for so long to speak on behalf of this. So that hearing was on Thursday, the 19th. We met out on site with them on the following Friday to discuss replacement of trees in lieu of the tree that's being removed. I've offered to plant 2 trees out there, as well as 2 shrubs to provide some screening for them. The red maple is growing into a red oak, so it's not really the best situation as far as screening goes, so we're going to improve that out there, as well as there's a lot of bittersweet that we're going to remove, which is choking out the rest of the vegetation. Yep.
All right. So the correspondence I have is dated August 31st, and it pertains to a number of different trees at different locations. Are all those resolved, Mr. Hardeman?
Yes, so the large silver maple, if I can go through them, at 80 Fisk Street.
Yeah.
That was one that we actually went in with an air spade to excavate down to see very carefully what the root system looked like. We were able to just cut one root away to install the sidewalk, and that tree is healthy, and we don't have to really do anything with that. The second tree on that correspondence is the red maple that we're talking about now. The third tree is a black cherry on the corner of Fisk and Bailey. That also was being choked out by bittersweet. That tree was not objected to, and that was removed last Friday.
There's an oak on the front page.
Yeah, there's 98 Fisk,
Yep.
is a large oak tree.
No, I'm sorry. The large oak is the one that we were able to maintain
Okay, got it.
by the air spading. The silver maple at 80 Fisk was actually 20 feet off the right-of-way, so that is not a public tree and was not
All
in
set.
poor condition, so that's a private tree.
Okay.
Is that tree with all the sticks around it, is that the one that you saved?
Yes,
All the 2x4s around it?
yes, that's the
What
oak.
was the purpose of the 2x4s? Just curiosity.
When they were doing the work, if they swung the machine, they wouldn't damage the bark on the tree.
Okay. I was going to say, if it was holding up the tree, ain't going to hold it up much.
No, 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 that's a very, very healthy tree.
Okay. All right, so, so we're talking tonight really around one tree. You've had discussion. Sounds like you have come to an accommodation. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, I'll,
And I want to, yeah, do you care to speak on it at all? You don't have to, but, okay, thank you. All right. And if he doesn't say something you agree with, you jump up and say something, all right? But I know he won't. Okay, so this, this seems to be a growing, no pun intended, growing topic at this board, right? The last year or so, we've had a number of these conversations, you as tree warden, and we as the, I guess, the last appellate body, if you will. And this is a byproduct of our community's demand for sidewalks, really. And the need for, we have to take some action. If we're going to put sidewalks in that are functional and appropriate, then unfortunately, years of trees growing for many years in the right-of-way or along the sidewalk pathway become a potential victim here. So it's going to, I suspect, be something that we talk about again. But I'm glad to see that you were able to work something out to the satisfaction of the particular residents involved, and I appreciate your efforts in that regard. So I guess the action you need from us tonight is to approve the remediation plan that you've offered?
Yes, please.
Okay. Do we have a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Yep.
Thank you. Mr. Kratman offered the motion, and I heard Ms. Wellman offer a second. So all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? I will vote in the affirmative as well, so that's 5-0. I want to thank you both for your patience this evening and for hanging in there with us. And I appreciate, and I know the board appreciates, your working with the tree warden and his team to make Fisk Street hopefully a terrific street with the sidewalk, which I know is always a terrific roadway, but in a great neighborhood, but it will be hopefully even better now with the sidewalk. So thank you for that. Mr. Hardeman, thank you for your patience.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to thank, Mr. Hardeman, I know this isn't on our agenda, but I also want to thank you for your work getting that flashing beacon back up on Whipple and Rogers. I'm sure many of us have received those phone calls. And, we went by the other night and I know you had it installed and you were waiting for, it was taken down with an accident. The town had to pay to replenish it because the person didn't have insurance, so that's what took so long. You finally got it back up. I think it's energized, it's working, so the residents will be aware that it's there. We've received many calls. We appreciate that. Thank you.
As one who lives about a block away from there and has had to ingress or egress that intersection often, I appreciate it as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Okay, very quickly, you have proposed meeting dates for next year, 2024. Just want to mention that, as always, these are subject to change, but we've been asked to try to help our town manager's staff to get ahead of planning purposes. As you know, a lot of our meetings require public hearings where there are notification requirements. Excuse me. So to the level that they can have forewarning and advise applicants, having our entire meeting schedule for 2024 available is a benefit to the community. So I hope you all had a chance to look at it. As is the practice, we try to avoid vacation weeks, school vacation weeks. We try to avoid any holidays, civic holidays or religious holidays. Mistakes happen. Things come up from time to time, but as stated, if need be, we can adjust any of these dates. So go ahead.
There's one date that's going to need to be changed. The April 2nd meeting should be April 9th, because the town election is not until the Saturday before the 9th.
The 9th. Okay.
Because of Easter, it
Yep.
adjusted.
Oh, it's that Easter, yeah.
There we go, get that religious holiday implication, yeah. All right, so with that one change, can I ask for a motion to adopt this schedule as presented, subject to change at the board's discretion?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, motion offered by Ms. Wellman, seconded by Mr. Holland. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye on that, so that's 5-0. And then I want to bring your attention to the application submittal deadline. So based on that schedule that we just adopted, our secretarial or executive assistant staff made an extraordinary effort here to schedule out the deadlines that are required when we're going to have a public hearing. So you can see, by way of example, our January 9th select board meeting. If you're going to have a public hearing on a license of some sort, you have to have the application in by December 11. It has to make the agenda by January 2nd with all of the required materials. The abutters list has to be taken care of by December 4. The town crier, which is required advertising with a tombstone or another publication, has to be done by December 15. And then the 7-day requirement is December 22nd. So you can see that you're running over a month ahead of our meetings if you are trying to get on an agenda. So giving the applicants or proponents of any of these license changes that we deal with an opportunity to have a line of sight and plan appropriately appears to make a lot of sense. So I want to commend the staff for making this happen. This is a first, as far as I know, and I am sure it took a little bit of effort to get that done. So if there's no questions about that, I don't think we need to vote to adopt it. I want to make it as informational. We already adopted the date, so everything flows from there.
It's to be posted on the website, on the select board.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah, it's great.
And the
That's
April
great.
2nd date will be amended to.
We'll amend it tomorrow.
To those dates, yeah, okay.
Never seen this.
Yep, it's a great
Richard,
tool.
Based on the planning board, does something similar.
Yeah.
don't they put the whole?
We can only have one person talking, so. Mr. Kratman, you have a comment you want?
Yeah, I was sitting there looking at this, the April 2nd needs to be changed.
Yeah.
But one of the things is, our requirements are to post something in a publication, and posting this saying that it has to be put in the, I think that could be confusing. I think that something that it says town crier on it. I mean, you could put it in the Advocate, the whole Sun, whatever it may be. It has to be a publication that goes out to the public. So I think that should be amended to say some sort of, it must be publicized in a local paper.
Has to be print media, to
Yeah.
my knowledge.
Yeah.
Of local distribution, so that's either the Crier or the Lowell Sun. We just use the Crier because it's the least expensive of the two.
Yeah.
But
good point.
we can change that to be more general.
Yep,
The
thank you.
the applicant should have the choice.
Yep, absolutely.
Mr. Mackey, you had a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know we're not going to take a vote on this, but this is based on something the planning board's been doing for some time.
Great.
And my only question is, do we need a policy on this, something to back this up so it can actually be enforced? That way somebody's not coming in later than X date and
It
Creating
doesn't make the
challenge.
Already
agenda.
regulatory.
It's not on the agenda.
fair enough.
We don't have the material, we can't take action anyways. So I guess that's the ultimate enforcement, right?
Fair enough.
Okay. All right. Mr. Montori, I know we covered the town council invoice. Did you have any other items you wanted to talk about tonight?
No, I'm all set. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to minutes. Mr. Holland?
Yes, I have two sets of minutes, one for September 12th and one for September 19th. I'll make a motion to approve September 12th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Second.
All right, the motion is made by Mr. Holland, seconded by Mr. Kratman. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's a unanimous vote with the chair's affirmative vote.
And now I'll make a motion to approve the September 19th, 2023 meeting minutes.
Second.
Okay, motion's offered by Mr. Holland, seconded by Mr. Kratman. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye, that's unanimous. Okay, so I think we've covered everything on our agenda. I mentioned at one point this evening, the tax classification hearing, just to give us the necessary wiggle room and planning space. We want to try to move to the 21st of November. That's not a scheduled meeting date at this point, but I want to get it on everyone's radar, and hopefully we can make that work. We have a meeting, as I mentioned earlier, on the 28th of November, and we currently have one scheduled on the 14th. I'm going to ask for the board's feedback. We can ask the delegation to come in that evening if
Which evening, the 21st?
the 14th, if they're available. We could also, I know we met last week and discussed housing, and we all agreed that we would have a continued discussion with the Housing Authority and the Planning Board. If this board wanted to use the 14th for that purpose, we could reach out and check on availability for those boards to join us at the table to continue or at least initiate that discussion. Is there any consensus or thought process that my colleagues would prefer?
14th for a next step on the affordable housing. Sounds good. Some sort of a agenda or guiding document on the discussion, high bullet points for just whatever we're going to be focusing on, just kind of guide it a little bit, would be the recommendation there. And then for the 21st, works for me for a tax classification hearing.
Okay. So since you opened the door, I'm going to ask you to draw up an agenda
Love it.
for the housing.
Too easy.
All right? If you don't mind, take that on. Okay? And then you can circulate it to the board, and we'll reach out to the planning board. Can we ask you to handle that, Mr. Montori?
We'll reach out to all the boards.
And the zoning and the housing authority? See if we can get everyone to the table.
Mr. Chairman,
Ms. Wellman?
does it make any, I think we should extend the invitation also to the school committee to attend if they wish, because there are always, it always seems to come up that there are school impacts when we have these conversations, so I think it would be efficacious to invite them to come if they wish.
Okay, we can make that happen. All right, so everyone's good with at least attempting to do a housing meeting on the 14th?
Yeah.
Is that good? And we'll do the rate tax hearing on the 21st. And I will do my best to see when the delegation is available, any of those 3 dates.
Yeah.
And we will also, I know, no surprise based on our discussion, but we'll have to revisit the MBTA communities discussion on one of those 3 dates. So stay tuned and we'll figure that out. Okay? All right, thank you for your patience tonight. I appreciate it. Let me ask if there's a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion's offered by Mr. Kratman, seconded by Mr. Holland. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Chair votes aye. We now are adjourned at 8:55 PM. Have a great evening.